You want to have a good image to work from. And I tell you, that's the thing we struggle with the most, your reference. If it's bad, you're going to work yourself to death. You're working from a flash photo. Somebody else sent me a flash photo too this week. It's all you've got. Teresa, with your mom. It's probably all you've got. Your mom's in heaven? Yes. So you don't have anything else to work from. So working from life and getting some experience on how to make the face look more realistic instead of all washed out with a flash. So this is my little granddaughter, Destiny. And y'all, some of y'all are probably sick to death of seeing her on Facebook.
Yes.
Sorry, David. Get over it. It's all right. She is just the apple of our eye. First girl in 40-something years. So she's a sweetheart. And I have a little video. I would normally show it, but I'm not going to put y'all through that. But I set her up right here with this little tutu and some pearls. And I have her video, she twirls her feet. So she's twirling these feet and she's looking down at everything. And her little eyes are just huge and she's looking at the pearls and she's looking up at me and then she just throws her head back in laughter. It was just the sweetest, it's my favorite photo session with her so far, and I do one every week. I do, I just love her to death. So I chose this picture. There's a bunch of them, but I wanted to do a head and shoulders for you guys today because that's what I'm encouraging you to start with, a head and shoulders. So there's not a lot of things to figure out. Most of the other ones needed to have her little twirly feet or her hands holding the beads or something. So I didn't want to do hands and feet and all that with you guys yet. I wanted to start simply. The first thing usually that I think about is placement on the canvas. And I shared with you last week that I like about a 12 by 16 or 11 by 14 is a good size. For a baby, we don't want to get larger than life. A baby will be scary if it's larger than life. A face that is life size is from your thumb to your middle finger. So you know a baby is going to be a little smaller than that. And then you also got to remember to add on the head. If a person has hairline like David's, his hairline is up at the top of his head. So I'm going to measure and consider that his hairline is up here. So with her, it's the same. It's way up here because she has just that little bit of hair on the top. But I want to find a place. Most people jump right in and start doing eyes and nose and mouth and get all this detail. And then they find that they've got it too big or too high or too low. So you want to spend as much time as you need to on this front end, making a place, and then what I'm going to show you here, finding a spot and then establishing if there's any tilt at all to her head. And then deciding how her face is proportioned in these three areas. From her hairline to her brows, from her brows to her nose, and from her nose to her chin. Those are the three proportions of length that are the most important thing you do about the whole portrait. If you draw beautiful eyes and a beautiful nose and a beautiful mouth, and they're a little too high or a little too low, it will never look like your subject. It will look a little off. You'll always go, something's wrong and I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. I usually misjudge right here from the eye to the nostril or right here. I usually get that too long or short. It's difficult to judge that.
So those three areas, are they equal?
Well, that's what you have to use your powers of observation to decide that. We start out assuming that those three sections are equal, and they almost are on her. She's a little bit longer right here. I never start a drawing that I don't have a paintbrush or a wooden skewer. I've got some over here when you guys get ready to draw that I can use to measure with and to do plumb lines with. And that's what I'm going to be teaching you. Some of you have heard me say this a million times, so I think I'll probably say something new that'll register for you. But I'm teaching you comparative measuring so that when I come around to your easel, I don't just fix it for you. I tell you why it's off and show you how to self-correct it by measuring and comparing it to something else. So I'll be saying that a lot. So first of all, and if you spend 20 minutes figuring out these three sections of the face, it will be if you spent the whole class figuring that out, it will save you weeks of struggle trying to fix the features on the face. So on the forefront, spend this time figuring out those 3 segments. If I were doing a different view of her, I would look, she's just front and center. I would look for a beautiful pattern, and that's something I teach that goes a little bit beyond just making an accurate drawing. I would look for a beautiful S shape, or I really don't see that. If her head was turned like this, you would see a S pattern. That's really pretty. Maybe I could go something like this and get something like that in there to make it a little bit more interesting, just so that I have some beautiful form. Because in nature, there's patterns in nature that you see repeated spirals and S's and all kinds of things like that that God did. And so for us to look for beautiful patterns like that in our artwork, it keeps them from being stiff. So that's something that I talk about more. And I might think about that a little bit. How can I make this white tulle around her head and maybe these pearls kind of into a pattern? I don't know. But really, all I want to think about right now is I'm going to go up to the top of this canvas, I think. I have to decide, am I going to crop her like these children up here are cropped? And I want to zoom in to these little faces sometimes, because you don't want to view a baby from across the room. You want to view a baby up close and sweet, because you're right there ready to smooch their little cheeks. So I would not probably crop her head, because I like this little bow up here. I'd like to put a little bit of that in there. So I'm going to think this through. I don't want to have too much room down here, because the way I've cropped it, I can only see her pearls. I can see a little of her hand. I don't want to do her hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these pearls pretty sharp and contrasty in here, but as they move down, they're going to just melt, and they're not going to have a lot of detail, because I don't want to lead you out of the picture, out of the painting. So I'm thinking about this before I start. What's my plan? Proper planning, I have that up at the top. P. Proper planning prevents, my stepdad used to say piss poor performance, but proper planning prevents poor performance. So think about it a little bit. How do you want this to go on the canvas? Also, is there any tilt to her head? And I said this last week, but our head weighs about 15 pounds, according to a chiropractor I went to one time. So it gets hard holding it up. So I'm looking around, and every single one of you, your head is tilted right now. Every one of you. Letta's looking down, so hers might be a little straight just because she's looking down, and it's suspended forward. But always look for the tilt, because your brain is constantly going to want to straighten it up and make everything straight, right, Katya? Yes. Even if you start with a tilt, your brain later on, you're going to forget about it, and pretty soon you're up here making this eye up here, because your brain automatically does that, because it tries to balance us off. So thinking about tilt, do you think she's tilted just glancing at it? Just a tiny bit. And the way I check that is I look right here. This is called the fulcrum. I look right here up through the center line between the eyes and the fulcrum. Sometimes you can tell down here on the chin. But I laid my brush, and she has, this would be straight. So she has just a tiny degree. What would that degree, you mathematicians, what would that degree of tilt be? Come on. 5. Okay. Thanks, teacher. I don't have any idea. If you know your protractor and your that stuff, you can figure that out better. But I just have to compare it to a straight line. So I will go ahead sometimes and put that little degree of tilt in, just to remind myself. A light line, and that's the reason I like Vine charcoal, because it wipes off really easily. You're not fighting with a pencil trying to erase it. A graphite pencil on canvas will hardly erase, and it's very difficult to cover that with your paint. People do it and they work it out. They put 2 or 3 layers of paint on, but I suggest using the Vine charcoal. So a little bit of a tilt, and I'm going to keep it light. And I know if it tilts a little bit that way, it's going to tilt a little bit. This would be straight. Can everybody see that? And it's a little bit of a tilt. What would that tilt be, Reba?
I don't know. Maybe the same thing. It's not much.
So I kind of start with a cross. I start with a cross, and that's easy to remember, just for the tilt. Then I make a mark where the top of the head's going to be and the bottom of the chin's going to be. And remember, life-size face is this for an adult. That would be hairline to chin. I'm going to bring it in for a baby and make it smaller. So I'm going to say her chin is here and her hairline is about here. Yeah. That's all I have to think about. Hairline, chin. I'm going to leave a little room for her hair up here. Hair's not so important. You can adjust the hair. It gets big, it gets small. We almost always make the hair too small. So all I have to think about now, I'm going to remember the tilt. I'll come back in there and put that in a minute. But all I have to think about, and I'm going to get rid of this S right now because y'all don't need to know about that. Hairline, chin. I'm also going to double check because I don't want to have too much room left over down here. I don't want her to be, me to have to make up the rest of her shoulders, or if you crop people at an odd place, like at the waist, it's not a good place to crop. Usually head and shoulders are the bust. You'll see in portraits, it's comfortable. You don't want to crop people here at a joint. Usually, and people get away with it. You don't want to crop somebody here at the wrist. It just feels like amputation or something. It's just a little disturbing. You don't know why, but so there's certain places you want to crop. So like I said, I'm going to make this melt and just do her head and shoulders. And I'm going to check from her chin to about where I'm going is the same as from her eyebrows to her chin once I got that in. So I want to make sure I have enough room for that. Hairline, chin. Now all I have to do is figure out these two lines, eyebrows and nose. Those are the only two lines I have to figure out to make sure that I've got my proportions right. It's really simpler. Your brain will complicate it, but it's really simpler than you imagine. And if you do this a bunch of times, it'll become second nature to you. So I've already measured from her hairline to her brows, and I put my finger on my stick. When I first started doing this, I would use a wooden dowel and I'd make a little mark there. So I'd remember that's the width. From there to there, from here to here is the same. And she's exactly the same. That's to the bottom of her nostrils, under here, because her head's raised up a little and I'm seeing underneath her nose a little. So she's exactly the same. You can start assuming with your picture that they're exactly the same, and then you check it and you see, do they have a really long nose? Do they have a really long chin? If their mouth is open with a big smile, chances are they're really long down here because their mouth is open, so it's going to add that much distance. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just guess about how dividing this into equal thirds would look. So my first estimation is a guess. Now, this is not the same size as this, and that's where everybody gets confused, okay? So all I have to think about, hairline, chin, that's my size, dividing this into equal thirds. Or if it were off, I would have to remember, this is my longer piece. This is my longer piece. So I'm going to go back over here and check it. 1, 2, this one might be a little bit longer, look. I measured, yeah, it's a tiny bit longer. Just a tiny bit, but these two are the same. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to check it. It's going to be a different spot on my stick because it's a little bigger. So I'm just going to come over here. And if you've made a real wide mark like I just did, you need to thin it up so you know exactly where you are. It needs to be a thin line and not a scribbly. I want you to be able to see it. Here to here. So see, that's a little smaller. I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to bump it up just a little because this is a little bit bigger. Can y'all see that? Okay, there, a little bit bigger, and these two are the same. Biggest part of the whole portrait are those two lines. So spend the amount of time you need getting those right. Over here, they're this big. Over here, it's bigger. You see what I mean? But I'm not worried about the size, I'm just comparing it. I'm just comparing it. That's the whole thing that I do throughout the whole thing is I'm comparing. This is the same as this. This is bigger than this. You know, and when it's amazing how symmetrical we are and how you'll find, hey girl, come on in here, how you'll find so many things that are the same and you'll be able to fix it. So find a spot for placement. Now I can look and I can compare from her chin to her brows is the same as here to about where I want to go, the top of her hand. So chin to brows, and I want to make sure I have enough room, and I do. So I don't want to run out of room on here. And then I've got invested all this time in a drawing, and I think I'm patting myself on the back. Boy, you did pretty good on that drawing, but it's in the wrong place, or it's too low, or it's too high, and you're like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone ahead because I didn't want to erase it. Or one of my students is like, oh, I don't care. I'm not drawing it over again. It was too hard to get it the first time. So they went ahead and just left it there. I have a student that did that with a portrait one time, and there was about this much room above the head. And I said, no, it was just nothing up there. It was a man, so we couldn't put any more hair on it. So my suggestion was, let's restretch the canvas, because she did a beautiful job on the portrait. And now it's fine. It doesn't bother me. But it looked like the man was really small, and he was a figure in history. It looked like he was falling out the bottom of the canvas. But because she had invested all that time and we didn't catch how low it was on the canvas, and that's easy to do. You're all enamored with trying to get a likeness. You're not even thinking about where it's laying on the canvas. So if I can tell you anything, it's spend some time on this placement. Then the next step that I do is sometimes I like to find the halfway mark. The eyes are the halfway mark if you're looking straight ahead. If the head tilts, then suddenly the eyes go way up. If the head tilts forward, then suddenly the eyes go way down on the head. So you always have to look and just make a note of where the eyes are on the head. That helps me because wherever the eyes are, I know I have to fit all the features under there. And most of the time, people put the eyes way up high on a face.
You go through the middle of the eye or top of the eye?
It just depends. You check it yourself and see. But usually, an adult head, this only happens if they're looking straight at you. There's no tilt at all. But that's the way our eyes are set. For a child, the eyes are down in the lower third of the head, always. Or for a baby animal. If you try to do a kitten and you put the eyes too high on the head, it's creepy looking. And you don't know why. You keep looking at you. I did the eyes right. It looks like there's enough room between the eyes and the nose, but everything, all the features are bumped up too high on the face. And so even on most animals, an adult animal, the eyes are halfway down the head. So that's a good thing to write down in your notes and always check that. For her, her halfway mark is right here on her eyebrow. Not the peak of her eyebrow, but right here on the low part of her eyebrow. So I'm measuring from the top of her head and there to the chin. That's the halfway mark. So I can say with pretty much certainty that here's the brow line, the peak of the brow, and here's the low point. So let's check it. Here to here and here to here. That's about right. That's the halfway mark on her. So I know that that's where her brow goes. My brain would want to start making her eyes up here. And she'll look older and creepier. Then she'll look funny with her eyes way up here. Her eyes are going to need to come down. See how low down her eyes are from her brows. So I figure out my halfway point. So I have several things going on here. I have placement, top of head, bottom of chin. I have the thirds, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Pretty close to equal. This is the larger one. I have the tilt, and I've lost it a little bit, but I'm going to put it back in there just so I can remember there's a tilt. See the beauty of the charcoal? It just erases without any problem. And that may be daunting to you a little because you're going to lay your arm in it and stuff. When you get finished with the drawing and you feel like it's good and correct and proper and you're scared you're going to lose it before next week, we can spray a little fixative on it. Not a lot. I don't like to use a lot of fixative, but the fixative will keep it from smudging if you're worried about losing it. I don't spray them because I'll draw it and I'll leave it here, and then when I get ready to paint, charcoal is organic and it just mixes right in with my paint. It's not a problem at all. So I'm putting that tilt back in, and remember I have a little bit of a tilt this way with the eyebrows. Probably not quite that much. So I'll put my tilt back in to remind me that these features are going to be a little bit on a tilt. Just a little. So don't draw them straight. So now I've got the most important part of the whole portrait down. When I first learned this from Daniel Green, I was his class monitor and I was running around trying to time the models and get everything set up, and then I'd run over to my easel and I'd measure the model, and you position yourself so that you're easel is here and your model is here. And so you can hold your plumb line up. And then you can go back over here. And you know, I'm thinking of the hands of the clock, like I told you guys a few weeks ago when I'm looking at tilt. Is it 1 o'clock? Is it 3 o'clock? I'm thinking about that. So I got all these dots on here, and here he comes. And he was so stern, and I was scared to death of him. And here he comes, and he goes, he's standing there all quiet, and he goes, so what are all these dots? And I just could have started crying. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to measure. And I think it's pretty good, but I didn't say that. But it was confusing in the beginning because you put all these marks and then you forget what the heck these marks are. So don't feel daunted by that. And if all this is just wearing you out, just draw it. Just draw it out of your head according to your instinct. And when I come around, every time I come around, we'll check all these things that I'm telling you this morning so you don't have to memorize it. Like a window shade, and this comes from Daniel Green down through Old Master's teachings. I'll come like a window shade down this way, and I'll begin at the top. Here's the hairline. Here's the eyebrow. And I'm looking at every mark I make. I'm going to indicate the thickness of her eyebrow, her lid, her lash line, the bottom of her eye. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing because remember there's a little tilt. Top of her eyebrow, and I look every time I make a mark because if I'm not, I'm making it up. So my head is constantly, every mark or every brush stroke, I look. The top of her brow, the thickness of her brow, and sometimes you can go ahead and just shade it in like that so you can remember that's the thickness of her brow. She's got really strong brows. Her lid line, her crease, her lash line, the bottom of her eye. Her nose, I know this is the bottom of her nose. Her little nostrils are higher than that, so I can put those little dots. If there's any shadow under the nose, I'll indicate that, and I really don't see much of a shadow. Moving slowly like this, I can more accurately judge these distances. The top of her lip, the opening of her top lip, opening of her mouth, the shadow inside of the opening of her mouth, I'm going to shade that in. Her bottom lip, and then there's a little shadow under her chin. So I move down like a window shade and I make those little increments. You don't have to do it this way. This just works for me because what happens is if I move down slowly like this and I get to the bottom and I don't have enough room, I can quickly see that I'm off before I've drawn any features at all. So I just move slowly down that way and I try to mark all the proportions. Now for some, this looks like it's gotten off a little bit, and it has. I smudged it. The bottom of the nose is here. So see, I can quickly correct that. And my eyeball's a little bit better because I've been doing it for a while. So the nostrils are going to be here, up higher. I don't know if that's exactly where they go. The top of her mouth here. The opening of her upper lip, the inside of her mouth, bottom lip, bottom of bottom lip, shadow. Okay. Sometimes you can begin to see a likeness just with these little marks because the proportions are right. Sometimes you can see it a little bit, not always. So now I've come down this way. Now I'm going to start moving from the inside out. And I tell this story every time, but Daniel Green talks about it, and he says most people draw a circle and start doing the eyes, nose, and mouth. And then they've got, you know, that's just the way they do it. He did the map of the United States when he was in 5th grade, and he tried to fill in all the states after he had drawn the outline, and he quickly found that he couldn't fit all the states in. So he started over drawing each state from the inside out accurately. And he made a much better map of the United States, and that's how he does a face. Once he gets these proportions, he's very much a draftsman and has that engineer brain of figuring out the proportions. He starts from the center here and works his way out drawing. So that's what I'm going to do. That's how I do it, and it works. It works for me every time. I'm going to look at her, and I'm going to determine a couple of things. How many eyes across here can I fit? 1, 2, She's got a little bit more than one eye width between her eyes, and usually babies do. Their eyes are wide set. So from here to the shadow is an eye width, from here to the end of that eye, and then 3/4 of an eye width across. So I can start out by drawing one eye, and it's not an almond. Don't draw almonds. If you do, I'm going to come around and correct you. I won't be mean though, I promise. There's all kinds of angles going on even around this little soft baby eye. It's up, over, down. Her little tear duct is like a little box. Then it goes this way, then it goes flat, then it goes this way. Then I'm looking at, you know, the pupil. So I'm drawing it up here. Let me get back here. Am I making it too large? Am I making it too small? I'm looking at the eye whites on each side. They're a little triangular shape. I want to make sure I get those little triangles. The top of her iris is cut off. It's not a complete circle. If you put a complete circle, they're like bullseyes. Most of the time you don't see the complete iris. So you decide, do I cut the top off? And a little of the bottom is cut off. I don't usually put the bottom lash line on there, especially on a baby, because it looks like they have eyeliner on. So I like to kind of leave that and maybe just put a little bit of a shadowing under there. I like to go ahead and get that pupil on there pretty quick. So I have that one eye. I've started. Now I want to measure it. So, and you can decide and tell how big an eye is. Typically, the socket is about that big. So the socket, there's a hole in the skull, and so you know if the eye is this big this way, it's going to be that big that way. It's exactly the same. It's a circle. So that gives you the ridge for the brow bone. It also gives you the little socket for under the eye. Everybody has a little under eye socket here. Typically, you can fit 5 eyes across here. Don't be overwhelmed. I know this is a lot. 1, 2, 3 to the shadow, 4 to the end of the eye, and 3/4 of a width there. So now I've determined the width of her face. Slowly, going slowly across. There's a little bit of a tilt, remember, so this eye's higher. So I can come over here now and I can draw the shape of this eye. Again, I'm not going to make it up. I've got to look at what I'm doing. Across, down, and I didn't say this enough, but I'll say it. I will have a baby on here. It will not be Destiny. It'll be a baby. That's my goal. That's our only goal when we start, is to have a baby. And I can already tell that's a little too low. There we go. It's hard to draw sideways too, y'all, so give me a little grace. When I get done with a demo and I sit directly in front of my easel, I'm like, oh, this is heaven. I can see what I'm doing. All right. She's wonky looking now, I know, but we'll fix it. Another thing about the eyes is that typically what you do here, because these are spheres, circles, what you do here is the same as here. What you do here is the same as here. Here is the same as here. And here is the same as here. So when you look at that, there's a rhythm to doing eyes that you'll be able to see. I'm going to have to move over in the front so I can see what I'm doing with these eyes, because I can't really tell. So I'll start putting them together at this stage. The nose, now see I have the nose is way over to the side. So I haven't, now that I have the eyes here and I've measured how far they should go. 1, I'm going to check it again. 2, 3 to the shadow, 4 to the end. That one might be a little big. And then 3/4 of an eye over there. Now I can start using plumb lines and I can see what all intersects. The tear duct, the nostril is a little, make sure your picture's straight. The nostril is a little, and I'm just using an up and down plumb line, almost exactly below, a little bit in from the tear duct on that side. On this side, it comes straight down from the tear duct. That's the edge of her little nostril. And typically, that looks really close there, so I'm going to have to check it. But typically, there's a circle. I make a circle on the tip of the nose for a baby, or for anybody, because we have that little, what do you call it, cartilage on our noses. There's a circle here, there's a circle here. I'm just gonna put that dark so you can see it. May be too close. I may have to move it down or move the eye up just a little bit because that looks awfully close right there. And then I erase out that circle later when I start. Then I can come down here and do, where does her mouth line up? And she's got a little tiny mouth, and it comes straight down from just inside the tear duct on this side. I don't know how high or low it is yet. And on this side, it comes just a little beyond the tear duct on that side. So she's got a little tiny mouth. So I already have the width of the mouth, and I can double check the width of the mouth by comparing it to something else. It's the same as from her eyebrow to the bottom of her nose, the width of the mouth. So you can double check it. You're always looking for what's the same to check yourself. So now I kind of got a messy thing here, but I can go back in here and I can start drawing the rest of the features a little bit better. The mouth, there's a great little tip, and I'm going to do it big up here so you can see it, for the mouth, especially a baby. You can do 3 ovals for the top lip with a circle in the center and 2 circles for the bottom lip. Can y'all see that? Then all you have to really think about is the opening of the mouth. Here, up, down, up, down. Top lip's usually shadowed. Bottom lip is usually just defined by the shadow under the bottom lip. So you can just do the lips by just the shadow shapes. Try not, like I said, don't use an almond. Try not to do your lips like this. Try to think about the shadow shapes of the lips once you find where they go, because they'll look a lot better and a lot more natural if you do that. So that's what I'm going to do for her. She has really pretty little rosebud lips. A little oval here. And then in the center is a little circle with usually that it's carved out because she's got a little rosebud. They have little rosebud mouths when they're babies. And then she's got her mouth partially open, so I can do 2 circles down here on the bottom. I know it looks creepy. Then get your little, if you want to keep, you know, the little mono zero eraser is my favorite. So while you're drawing, you want to have a little bit more control. Use this little eraser to just come in here and erase out these lines. And then I'm just looking at the inside of her mouth and the shape of that shadow. If you use the shadows, they'll help you so much. So it's up, over, down, up, down, and then over. The whole mouth is built on this opening between the lips. We get so distracted by the shape of the lips. But if you'll focus, Shirley used to tell us, if you'll focus on the shape of that opening of the mouth, your lips will look so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and shade in the top lip a little bit. I know I'm making a blurred mess out of it, but I'm going to come back in here and erase. See how it's lifting up some of the tone? If you erase too hard, you'll lift up a little bit of your tone, but that's okay. And then just use your eraser to kind of bring that together. Now, I know that her lips are not that wide, and it looks like I have a little bit too much room here. So these are the 2 areas that you're going to want to check pretty regularly to see, to make sure your measurements haven't gotten off somewhere. Top of her eyebrows, bottom of her chin. I'm going to go back and fix this because it's pretty rough looking right now. But I want to show you how I get the sides of the face, because that's where people really mess up too. I'm going to measure from, now that I know her mouth is in about the right place, remember it was straight down from the tear duct on this side and a little over from the tear duct on this side. So I might have it a little wide. I'm going to go from here to here and see how big that is. From the side of her cheek straight out to the side of her mouth is the same as what? Bottom of nose to the little shadow here. So I can put a little mark right there. And on this side, it's the same thing. A little bit more. Let me go up here to her eyebrow to the top of her nostril. Eyebrow to top of nostril. here to here. So I'll put a little mark right there. Then I can begin looking at the shape of her head. If I do a continuous line like that, it's going to look like a cartoon. It won't look like a real person. So don't ever make, I shouldn't say don't ever, try not to do continuous long lines because your brain can't accurately judge a long line. So you slow yourself down and you look at every single possible angle change. So let me show you on here what I'm seeing because not everybody sees that. I know, y'all. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Maybe that one could be continued. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So all those different angles, and I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go all the way around like that, but I'm slowing myself down to look at every single possible angle change here. I've already determined where the side of her head is. I know that comes in a bit. That comes in a bit. This goes this way. It starts to come in. It changes about here. When you're doing a baby with charcoal, it's going to be really harsh because everything about a baby, you have to remember, is really, really soft. So I'll go back in here real quickly in a minute and just soften everything out so it's not so, then it comes in. Her neck, let me take this out now so you can do this back and forth. What's nice about I've got some of these page protectors if you want to use them, is that you can write on them and still keep your picture good. Her neck is right here even with the side of her eye on that side, and the edge of her pearls is even with the side of the eye on that side. So that gives me the width of her neck. You don't really see much neck because babies are just so chunky. Her shoulder comes right into the side of her mouth, if I were to hold a plumb line there, and it's equal with down here on her chin. So it starts about here. If you put the shoulders too high, they look like they're scrunching. If they're too low, they look like they have this bobblehead that's about to fall over. So putting these shoulders in the right place is also key. This side, because there's a little tilt, is down about this level. And then if I were to follow the line here, it goes right through her little mouth, like that, to get the angle of her mouth. The other thing I can check, since I'm moving down, is from her chin to where her little tutu starts, is the same as from her eyebrow to the opening of her mouth. So her little tutu starts there. Her little arm pit is right outside of her head here. I put a line there. On this side, it's just outside of her head here. So see how you can use plumb lines all the way to the floor, and you're not just guessing where these things go. If you made her little body too wide, it would look funny. If you made it too skinny, it would look funny. If you made her neck too long, it would look funny. So those are all things that you can check and then begin to draw and fill in. Her little pearls are about here. I could measure those. I'm just going to put a line for her pearls right now, and then I'll go back in and draw those later. Her little ear is even with the top of her nostril right here. That's where the bottom of the ear starts, and you hardly see any of that. You see this little tulle ribbon. I'm slowing myself down and I'm looking at all these little changes. My goal here is not a beautiful drawing. My goal is to just teach you this principle of how to check and measure things as you go. Then she's got this little bow. Here's her hairline. The little bow is up here. Her, yeah, like this. So thank you, Phyllis. You are going to get a tip at the end of this class. You are so amazing. All right, so I'll figure that out later, but she's got a little bow up here, and I'm just going to kind of figure out where that goes. So that's my beginning. That's not very good. It's a face. It's not her. It's crude. It's harsh. I'll have to get around in the front of it so that I can see it. Really, I need to get my butt up off the stool and walk over there and look at it. It's a detriment for us to sit with our nose on the painting all the time and not get back from it, because you see things differently when you view it from a distance. It's hanging on the wall 6 to 10 feet away from you, so we need to look at it that way. Most artists stand when they demo, and they're constantly rocking back and forth. In fact, a few of the ones I've studied with, in their studio, they have a worn out carpet spot where they back up from the easel constantly. And it's this rocking thing. You rock back, you make a mark, you rock back. You make a mark, you rock back. So remember to do that. Don't let yourself keep smelling the thing through the whole thing without getting up and looking at it. Then I would, if you get to that point today, if you're really uncomfortable with this vine, you see how I've wiped it off and I've gotten it all over my hands. I have these woodless charcoal pencils that I really like. So they're solid charcoal. So I could come back in here and I could start really getting some detail for her. It's a little too hard for me. I still like the vine. I've got a feeling I'm a little bit off right here, that maybe these eyes need to bump up. You guys can see it from a distance, you think? This eye especially maybe needs to bump up just a tad. That maybe I got those too far. But I can go back in and check it. And I can start drawing some shadow shapes. Like she's got these little soft shapes here. And I forgot to mention with babies, I don't know, most of you aren't doing babies, but I like to go back in here and put circles. Babies are all completely, just about all circles. And when you get those circles in here, you can kind of judge where everything goes. If I were to draw circles on this, the nose is a circle, the nostrils, the cheeks, everything is circular on babies. The main thing about her too is she has really long eyelashes and they lift. And so when I get ready to refine this and start drawing the shapes a little bit better, I'll draw the shapes of the shadows, like under here is a shadow, so that I don't have a hard line around her chin. I just have a shadow shape. And you can get your little tortillon and go ahead and do this on your canvas if you want to, and start softening things and making them look more more painterly, and not, when I say painterly, I mean more like a drawing and not like a cartoon or a harsh, you know, a harsh drawing. Babies aren't harsh. Everything about a baby is really soft. There's a shadow beside her nose. There's a shadow under here. I'd come in here and really start. Her main thing is her little eyes. I wrote it down up here. And I gave everybody worksheets last week with a lot of details about working on a portrait. You don't have to memorize all those. You don't even have to do it the way I'm showing you. But this is a way that you can figure out what's off. And I'll be helping you with that as I come around to your easel. Any questions or thoughts? Is your brain scrambled?
What detail do you put down in charcoal before you start painting?
Well, today I made a deal with myself years ago, because I would be so excited to get to the color that I would sacrifice the drawing. And I always had problems that Shirley would come around and she'd say, your drawing is off, your drawing is off. And I'd be fighting with it. So I made a deal. I did that so many times that I said, I'm going to draw the whole 3-hour class. And then the next time I come back next week, I'm going to look at it all again with a fresh eye and measure and ask Shirley to look at it before I start putting color on it. You can rush right into it if you want to. But for me, I still make myself wait. And even if I draw late at night, sometimes I'll make myself wait until the next morning to go back and check myself. Not so much anymore, but I do that. You can do as much detail on here as you want to. It's good for us. It's good for us to figure out where all the shadows are. And people say, well, why would you do that much drawing and then you're going to paint over it? It seems a waste. Well, many portrait painters do head studies. Shane Neal does all kinds of 3 or 4 head studies for Senator Frist, for any of the people that he's doing. He'll do a whole paintings, head studies, before he actually does the commissioned portrait. So if he has to do that, if Kinsler does that, and these really famous painters do that, well, what's it going to hurt us to draw that head a couple of times and get more familiar with the head as we're drawing it? Then yes, we're going to put paint over it, but we've already determined where the shadow is. I don't even have to look to remember that shadow shape I just drew. I know that's a shadow under there. I know there's a shadow under here. So I would go ahead with your tortillon and begin doing all the shadow shapes. And I like to do a really nice detailed drawing on here, suddenly her cheek won't look so wide if we get this shadow in here. Because right now it's just white and flat. It's not white, it's purple. And you might ask me why I toned this purple. Any thoughts?
Babies,
Because there's yellow in her skin. No.
Yeah,
Right.
she's real, and babies,
babies have kind of lavender shadows.
sometimes they do. And she is really yellow. She's a little yellow. She's out in the pool with us a lot. She's got a lot of sun, but she's real yellow. So I'm thinking that some purple tones glowing through might be really pretty. The girl on the corner up there, Gloria, I had already toned that turquoise color, which is rather strong, but a turquoisey bluish green looks really nice with a peachy color. It's a beautiful contrast for shadows. So I try to think of what would the complementary color, that's why I had you guys do the color wheel, what would be the really beautiful complementary color that I might want to show through in some of the shadows. I don't know, I may not like this purple when I get done. I may paint it all out, but I have the opportunity if I want to paint it in a real quick, alla prima, all at once manner to let some of the purple, like hers, that was a 2.5 hour portrait session with a model. And I didn't cover a lot of it. A lot of the turquoise is showing through her skin tone. And I liked it. When I finished it, I'm like, don't you touch it. That's what I said to myself. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Right, Katya? Sometimes we get that first, I don't mean to call you out. She does beautiful portraits. Sometimes, though, we get this beautiful, really fluid, easy look because we just got it in the beginning, and then we just piddle it until we lose that beautiful first impression. She's my granddaughter. It's gonna be hard for me to make it, for me to be happy. I did this other one of her that I don't like at all. Doesn't look anything like her. And I have it over here. I keep thinking, well, I'll fix it. But something is really off with it. She looks like a little creepy baby to me on here. It's just not her. And so, you know, when Katya's trying to do her kids and she's like, something's not right. And I'm like, it looks fine, Katya. But she knows her children. And we know our loved ones. So that's why I said be careful. If it's the very first portrait you've ever done, be careful about doing somebody that you love and that's really tender. And I'll help you. Teresa's going to do her mom. I want to just do something that I want to do that I'm passionate about. So I started with my great-grandparents in a black and white picture. And it wasn't very good, but I could go back and fix it. This is too big. I knew when I did this, I did a quick sketch one night. It's too big. See, it's bigger than that. So I maybe even when I fix this, I may make her even a little smaller. She's tiny. She's tiny. So that feels a little creepy to me. If I viewed it from across the room, it would probably be okay. But there's still something that bothers me about it, that it's too big. So I was really mindful of that when I started this, but I still went big. They say the more scared we are, the bigger things grow, but also we just get bigger as we make adjustments with it. So try to start a little bit smaller than you think you might want it. Not too small though. A small head is really hard to do. So.